Let's pause here for a second, because the irony of this scene is almost cruel. Ricardo walks into that glittering ballroom, with his hand resting on his mistress' back, moving like the whole city belongs to him. The wealthy men who owe him money stare into their champagne, too scared to meet his eyes. Then the doors open, Elena enters, the wife he threw away, dressed in black silk as if she has come to bury him. But the real shock is not the dress. It is the small hand she is holding. A 5-year-old boy with Ricardo's exact steel-gray eyes. Ricardo's hand slips from Valeria's back as if he has touched fire in one heartbeat. The most feared man in the room forgets how to breathe. Now look at the child. He wears a tiny tailored suit, almost like a smaller version of the father who never knew he existed. The boy studies Ricardo with wide, curious gray eyes, and the whole ballroom feels ready to explode. Elena stands perfectly still, her dark hair falling neatly over her shoulders. She is not shouting, she is not crying. That calm is what scares everyone. Even hardened mob bosses shift back a step. Then the boy says, loud enough for the front row to hear, "Mama, is that my papa?" That single question hits harder than any bullet. Valeria starts to tremble. Her polished smile cracks as she looks at Ricardo, begging him to deny it, but he cannot even move. He is staring at the family he abandoned. Elena gives the smallest, coldest smile. "Perhaps we should go say hello," she tells her son, and her voice slices through the silent ballroom. She descends the stairs slowly, as if every step has been planned for years. The crowd parts for her like she is something dangerous. Watch Ricardo's face. This is a man who built an empire by pretending fear did not exist. He laughed at death, bribed police, crushed rival families, and never blinked. But as his discarded wife walks toward him with his own blood beside her, something in him finally cracks, for the first time. Ricardo understands that money, violence, and power cannot protect him from the life he ruined with his own hands. Elena stops 3 feet away. The boy presses against her leg, studying Ricardo with a seriousness that would make any grown man sweat. "I was sure we would be welcome," Elena says, soft but sharp. Then she looks at Valeria, and the contempt in that glance is almost elegant. Valeria tries to recover, stammering that they have not met. Elena cuts her off with one word: irrelevant, no shouting, no scene. Just a quiet dismantling. She calmly lists where Valeria lives, where she gets her coffee, and the hidden money in her accounts. "I know everything," Elena says, tilting her head. "I simply did not care enough to act until tonight." Valeria's face loses all color. Ricardo finally finds his voice and asks Elena to take the conversation somewhere private. Elena only lifts an eyebrow. She reminds him that he did not care about privacy when he paraded his young mistress in front of every dangerous family in the country. Her voice never shakes, and that makes it worse. "Why should I give you a courtesy you never gave me?" she asks. The room holds its breath. Men freeze with champagne glasses halfway to their mouths, watching the untouchable underworld boss get cut apart in public by the wife they all thought was harmless. Even Marco, Ricardo's right-hand man, steps forward with panic in his eyes. He can feel the power in the room changing hands. Marco leans in and whispers that every rival family is watching. Ricardo's jaw tightens until it looks painful, but he cannot stop staring at the little boy. Matteo tugs at Elena's hand. "Mama, I want to go home. I don't like him. He looks angry." That is the saddest part. The boy looks at his own father and sees a monster. Lena strokes his dark hair, but when she speaks to Ricardo, her voice turns cold. Children see what adults try to excuse. Ricardo snaps before he can stop himself. His hand shoots out and grips her wrist. The crowd gasps. Somewhere, a glass falls and shatters across the marble floor. He growls that they are leaving now. Trying to reclaim control he has already lost. He demands that they all leave together, his voice low and rough with panic. Elena looks down at his hand on her wrist. Across his knuckles is the tattoo he uses to justify everything he has done. "Power. Remove your hand," she says, "or I will remove it for you." Ricardo tightens his grip, still trying to prove to the room that he commands armies. Elena laughs. Not loudly, not cruelly, just softly, as if she already knows how this ends. "Oh, Ricardo," she murmurs, shaking her head. "You have no idea what is coming, do you? You have no idea what I have been building, while you were busy worshipping your own reflection." Before Ricardo can answer, the ballroom doors open again. 4 intimidating men enter in suits worth a year of rent. But the man leading them is the one who stops every heart in the room. He is in his 60s, silver-haired, and carries the kind of authority that does not need to announce itself. Whispers spread like fire. Someone gasps. That's Antonio Ver's. He has been dead for 7 years, except he is very much alive. The legendary boss walks toward his daughter as if he has waited for this exact moment. Elena's voice softens. Papa, she says, your timing is perfect, as always. Antonio stops beside her and looks at Ricardo, like a man deciding where to place the knife. Then Antonio looks down at the boy. And all that brutal coldness melts my grandson, he says, his voice rough with emotion. Mateo beams up at him. Mama said you had to stay hidden, he says happily. But now the bad time is over. Antonio rests a weathered hand on the boy's head and nods. Then he lifts his eyes back to Ricardo, and the warmth disappears. It is very much over, he says. The irony is bitter. Ricardo thought ambition had made him untouchable. But every person you crush while building an empire becomes another ghost waiting in the walls. Dirty money can buy silence for a while, but it cannot buy back the family you threw away. Here is the cruel heart of the moment. Ricardo believed he was the undisputed king, building his empire on Antonio's supposed grave. Now the dead man is standing right in front of him. Ricardo stammers that he saw the funeral photos, hating how weak he sounds. Antonio does not gloat. He simply says he faked his death to protect his daughter from power-hungry men like Ricardo. Then casts one sharp glance at Valeria. But the bitterest part comes when Elena steps between the two men. Ricardo feels his stomach drop as she chooses her father's side without saying a word. In that second, he understands that his kingdom was never as solid as he believed. Watch how Elena takes control without raising her voice. She suggests they move somewhere private, glancing at the frozen crowd. People stand there with their mouths open, some already reaching for their phones. Elena looks straight at Ricardo and calmly offers to expose his secrets on the dance floor if he prefers. She knows about the missing shipments. She knows about the stolen money. She knows which allies are only pretending loyalty. That is when the truth sinks in. The woman he treated like a decorative wife has spent years building a case against him. He thought she was harmless. Now she is holding the match that could burn his life to the ground. Defeated, Ricardo agrees to the private salon. Elena bows her head with brutal politeness and insists that her husband lead the way. As Ricardo walks through the parted crowd, he feels something he has never felt from them before. Not fear, pity. The whispers have already begun. Valeria tries to follow, but Elena stops her with a single look. Calmly, she tells Valeria to leave the country. Every piece of security Ricardo promised her, Elena explains, actually belonged to his wife. Valeria's voice breaks as she insists. Ricardo said the marriage was only a political arrangement. And that is the fatal mistake. She built her future on the promises of a liar, and now the air beneath her feet is gone. Elena's voice turns almost gentle, which makes the blow land harder. She explains how men like Ricardo work. They lie so often they begin to believe the fiction, then convince themselves the women around them are too blind to notice. Elena reaches out and tucks a strand of hair behind Valeria's ear. It almost looks kind, but it is pure control. She tells the mistress to find a man who respects his vows, then walks away. Valeria is left alone among wealthy gossips who will be talking about this night for years. The quiet wife has destroyed the glamorous mistress without raising her voice, and Ricardo's real punishment has only begun. Inside the velvet-lined salon, Ricardo stands stiffly by the fireplace, the crowned eagle tattoo on his neck, once a proud symbol of his violent empire, now looks painfully empty. He is trapped by people who have been moving around him for years. Antonio sits with his grandson while Mateo plays with a pocket watch, unaware of the tension pressing down on the room. Elena stands by the window like a shadow. Even Ricardo's bodyguard lingers near the door, trying to guess which boss will still be standing by morning. It is a suffocating display of shifting loyalties. Ricardo has worn fear like a crown for years. Tonight the crown feels heavy. Elena introduces the boy as Mateo. Ricardo tries to sound composed, saying he was about to ask his name. But Elena does not let him hide behind manners. She turns firelight, catching the sharp intelligence in her eyes, and lists every warning sign he ignored for 5 years. He never asked why she stopped attending parties. He never asked why their marriage went silent. Ricardo weakly says he thought she was recovering from losing the baby. That is when the trap closes. Elena reminds him how relieved he looked when he believed the pregnancy had failed. For 1 second, her cold mask cracks and real heartbreak shows through. Then she turns back to stone. Elena gives him the truth that cuts through everything. She hid their baby because she saw the monster Ricardo was becoming. Mateo looks at his father and says the one thing that would split any hard man in two. His mother told him Ricardo is only sad inside. And that is why he does cruel things. Something collapses inside Ricardo's chest. Decades of armor are undone by a 5-year-old. Ricardo manages to say that the boy's mother is very wise. Mateo simply agrees, looks back down at the watch, and dismisses him completely. For a man who spent his life ignoring everyone else, being ignored by his own son is a perfect kind of pain. Antonio finally returns to business. Shifting from tender grandfather to predator, he tells Ricardo, almost casually, that his future looks grim. Ricardo tries to puff himself up, accusing the old man of threatening him on his own turf. Antonio gives a dry, chilling laugh. Threats, he says, are for weak men pretending to be strong. When you hold every card, you simply state facts. He pours a drink and explains his absence. Faking his death was not cowardice. It was a mousetrap. The chaos after his death exposed traitors and let him clean house from the shadows. More importantly, it gave Elena time to conduct her own quiet investigation into her husband. Antonio's voice hardens. Elena needed time to understand that to Ricardo. She had been nothing more than a strategic asset. Watching Ricardo absorb that is painful, because he knows it is true. He treated their courtship like a takeover. He studied her weaknesses, gave calculated compliments, and played her like a piece on a board. What he never considered was that the quiet woman he was studying might be studying him too. Ricardo tries to defend himself, saying the marriage benefited them both. Elena tears the argument apart. Yes, she gained status. She also gained a cheating husband, an empty bed, and years of silence. The room has no mercy left for him. This is where the disaster becomes painfully clear. Ricardo finally understands that Elena did not decide to leave him tonight. She did not walk away when she learned about Valeria. She had already left him in her heart on their 3rd anniversary. Imagine her sitting alone in a huge cold dining room in Venice, waiting for a husband who had forgotten she existed. He stopped touching her, stopped seeing her, treated her like a contract in a womb, not a woman. That is what neglect does. It does not always explode. Sometimes it just hollows out the person who loved you until there is nothing left to hold. She watched the candles melt into wax, and that was when something inside her changed. She realized she had become furniture to him, a signature on paper, a silent part of the house. The film goes quiet here and it hurts. A clock chimes midnight across the room. Little Matteo sleeps in a velvet chair while Antonio guards him like a silverback. Ricardo, meanwhile, is truly looking at his son for the first time. The boy has his dark hair, Elena's nose, and Ricardo's stubborn jaw. 5 years of first steps and first words are gone forever. That loss finally lands on him, not as strategy, not as reputation, as grief. When Ricardo finally speaks, his voice is broken. The arrogant Mafia king is gone. What remains is a tired man who knows he has been outplayed. He asks Elena what she wants, already aware that she and her father have planned this for years under his nose. Elena gives him 3 demands. First, Matteo must be publicly and legally recognized as his heir. She wants him protected in every document, in every room, in every corner of the empire. Ricardo nods, because he would have demanded the same. Then she gives the second demand. Valeria must be gone, not dead, just paid off, sent far away and warned to stay silent. Elena wants mercy, but on her terms. Ricardo agrees, telling himself the affair had already grown hollow. Then Elena gives the third demand, and everything changes. She tells him to choose. She steps close enough for him to catch the scent of jasmine in her hair and looks him straight in the eye. He can remain the cold, untouchable boss who treats people like pieces on a board. He can visit his son like an investor checking a report. Or he can stop freezing everyone out and then wondering why no warmth remains. This is not a demand for romance. It is a demand for honesty. Either he becomes capable of being present or he stays away. Elena lifts her hand and traces the crowned eagle tattoo on his neck, the symbol of his ruthless reign. She asks him to choose something different, to try being a real father, a real husband, a better man than the one his father tried to create. This cuts deep because we know Ricardo's history. His father beat the softness out of him, teaching him that love was weakness and vulnerability got men killed. Ricardo built his walls to survive that childhood, and that is the tragedy. He became strong enough to terrify the world, but too damaged to hold the people who loved him. Elena is asking him to do the one thing he was never taught, stay open. Ricardo looks over at his sleeping son, and for the first time in years, something like hope moves inside him. He asks what happens if he changes. Does Elena come back and play happy family for the cameras? She shakes her head. What she offers is not performance. It is a rebuild from the foundation. Total honesty, no secrets, no public smiles hiding private cruelty. She admits it will be hard, and she cannot promise it will work. Her voice cracks as she confesses that despite everything he put her through, she never stopped. She stops before saying the word love. Even after all this, that word is still too dangerous to give him freely. Ricardo steps closer, desperate to hear the rest of that sentence, but Elena raises her hand. Real tears fill her eyes for the first time in years. She will not say the word because she does not know whether his damaged heart can even understand it. At that breaking point, Antonio steps in. The old man has seen enough Mafia storms to know when a room needs air. He lifts Matteo with a tenderness that makes Ricardo ache. Antonio says he is putting the boy to bed, but before he leaves, the temperature in the room drops. Decades of damage cannot be repaired in one midnight conversation, not even with tears, not even with truth. At the door, Antonio turns back, his eyes cold enough to stop a man breathing. He tells Ricardo that Elena has just given him mercy. Any other rival would have put a bullet in his head and taken the empire. The old man lowers his voice to a terrifying whisper. If Ricardo wastes this second chance or hurts his daughter again, Antonio will dismantle his life piece by piece until there is nothing left to bury. Then he carries Matteo out, leaving a heavy silence behind. On the other side of those doors, 300 rich people are still drinking champagne. The world keeps spinning while Ricardo's old life collapses behind closed doors. Elena drains her drink in one swallow and sets the glass down like she is ending the marriage with that sound alone. She heads for the door, desperate to return to Matteo. Ricardo crosses the room in 3 long strides and catches her arm. This time, his grip is gentle, not the harsh hold from the ballroom. Tears shine in her eyes. That is what makes it so painful. After all her planning, after all her strength, she is still afraid he will choose wrong. Ricardo looks at her and nearly chokes on the truth. He admits he does not know how to be a husband. His whole life has been built around being cold, useful, and untouchable. He tries to say more, but the words fail him. Ricardo admits that when he looked at their son, he wanted to burn his entire criminal world to the ground just to keep the boy safe. Elena gives him the truth he needs. That is love, Ricardo, she whispers. That is what happens when someone matters more than your ego. The word hits him like a punch. He was raised to believe love was a fatal flaw. But standing there in the firelight, watching Elena caught between hope and terror, he finally understands he loves her. Not the calculated version he used in the beginning. Not possession, not pride, real love, the kind that slipped in during quiet mornings and stolen glances, while he was too scared to admit it. This is where the mind of a gangster reveals its ugliest truth. Ricardo was so frightened by the idea of loving Elena that he tried to kill the feeling before it could make him vulnerable. He shut her out. He paraded women like Valeria through his life, trying to prove he felt nothing. But the walls were never as strong as he pretended. He finally forces the words out. He is afraid love will make him weak, that enemies will use it to break him. Elena does something extraordinary. She lifts her warm fingers to his face and tells him that maybe caring about something more than power is what makes a man worthy of wearing the crown at all. Elena looks him in the eye and tells him she cannot choose for him. But for the first time in 6 miserable years, she believes the man she once met might still be alive beneath all that ice. She tells him to think, to talk to Marco, to do whatever he must do. But he should not come after her to save his pride or protect his name. He should come only if he truly wants to try. As she reaches for the door handle, Ricardo panics. He blurts out that he never forgot their anniversary, on their 3rd anniversary. While she sat alone in Venice, he was alone in a hotel room, holding a gift he could not bring himself to give her. This is where the irony becomes almost unbearable. Ricardo confesses that he spent weeks finding a master jeweler to recreate a diamond bracelet Elena's late mother used to wear. He sat in that Venice hotel room for hours with the box in his hand, trying to find the courage to go home. He wanted to tell her about the feelings that terrified him. Elena asks what happened, her voice barely above a whisper. Ricardo admits his own fear defeated him. He convinced himself he had hurt her too much, that showing up would only expose how badly he had failed. So the powerful, untouchable kingpin stood on a bridge, threw the priceless bracelet into the canal, and called it strength. The silence in the room is almost unbearable. Then Elena turns, tears streaming down her face, every piece of armor gone. She calls him a stupid, broken, impossible fool. She crosses the room, grabs his jacket, and kisses him. This is not a gentle romantic kiss. It is 6 years of rage, grief, longing, and desperate hope colliding all at once. Ricardo holds her, and for one brief second, the Mafia, the danger, and the past disappear. Then she pulls away, breathless and shaken, reminding him that a kiss does not erase what happened. They still have a mountain of damage to repair. Ricardo rests his forehead against hers, and for the first time in years, the numbness begins to hurt. Underneath that pain, Ricardo feels something unfamiliar, hope. Later the party has ended, but Rome is still awake. From the Palazzo Victoria, He looks down at the empire he built: clubs, illegal shipping routes, corrupt politicians, dirty judges. It took 20 years of blood to create that web, and in one night, he understands how worthless it all is if it costs him Elena and Matteo. Marco steps out of the shadows and places a glass of whiskey in his hand. He tries to sound calm, but the streets are already talking. The underworld is restless. Antonio Verdes has returned, and the sharks have smelled blood in the water. The tension between them is thick. Marco asks what the next move is, and even his voice carries hesitation. He tells Ricardo something he never thought he would say. In 15 years of bullets, betrayals, and enemies, he has never seen Ricardo afraid. Not once, but tonight, in that ballroom he saw it. Ricardo turns to his best friend and corrects him quietly. He was not just afraid. He was terrified. Marco assumes he means Antonio. Ricardo drinks the whiskey and gives him the real answer. He was not afraid of Verdes. He was afraid of himself. Afraid of the monster he had become, and of the beautiful things he had crushed without noticing. Here is the hard truth Ricardo finally sees. He spent his life chasing power because he thought it would buy him freedom, only to become trapped inside the thing he built. He laughs bitterly and admits he turned into the very man he once hated: his father. The thing he swore he would never become. His wife looked at him like a stranger. His 5-year-old son saw only an angry shadow where a father should have been. He built an empire, but somewhere along the way, he lost himself. Marco asks the question that matters: what are you going to do now? The words haunt Ricardo while the memory of Elena's desperate kiss still burns on his lips. It is time to choose. We are watching a man's entire worldview break in real time. Ricardo built a fortress out of money and violence because he did not want to be hurt. But Elena walked past every guard and reached the place he protected most by showing him the warm life he had abandoned: the missed dinners, the school plays, the small family moments he never had. They cut deeper than any knife. He looks at Marco and finally says it aloud. For the first time he chooses love over fear. But the decision is barely spoken before chaos erupts at the door, shouting, crashing. A guard stumbles backward, someone forces his way in. Imagine having the most humiliating night of your life, only for the door to burst open, before you can even breathe. In walks Luca Calabris, dripping with the confidence of a man who has never been told no. 2 goons follow him, their hands twitching near their holsters. Luca is the shark who has been circling Ricardo's northern border for years. In public, the 2 families play polite. Tonight is different. Tonight. Ricardo has shown weakness in front of 300 people. Luca strolls in, pretending this is only a casual late-night visit. It is pure opportunism. Strike the wounded man before he can stand again. The disrespect is deliberate. Luca walks to the bar and pours himself a drink without asking. Both men understand the insult. He swirls the glass and casually mentions Ricardo's wife, being Antonio Verdes' daughter, complaining that he never got the memo. That information, he says, would have changed the power dynamic. But watch Ricardo. He does not flinch, while Luca talks about secrets and alliances. Ricardo is quietly studying him, the tension in his shoulders, the grip on the glass, the hunger behind his smile. Power attracts loyalty, but it also attracts vultures. And tonight Luca has mistaken blood in the water for an invitation. Luca goes straight for the wound, Ricardo's hidden 5-year-old son. With a fake sigh, he says secrets like that make the underworld nervous. Then he has the nerve to suggest that a man who lets his wife embarrass him in public cannot manage his own house, let alone a syndicate. Luca frames himself as help, oversight support. The arrogance practically rolls off him. He believes he holds the cards. But the moment a man thinks he is the smartest person in the room, he usually stops noticing the trap beneath his feet. Ricardo simply tells him to choose his next words carefully. At this point, Luca is practically writing his own obituary. He doubles down, bragging about how careful he is while poking a sleeping dragon. Marco is ready to draw, but Ricardo waves him off. Why? Because Luca is showing his entire hand. He talks about Antonio returning after 7 years and hints that everyone is wondering whether Ricardo has become a puppet. In any other timeline, the old Ricardo would have put a bullet in Luca before the sentence ended. His men would have been dead on the carpet. That was the man who ruled through fear and fire. Now Luca is trying to awaken that man, and Ricardo knows it. This moment changes everything. After all that tension, Ricardo does not reach for his gun. He almost does. His fingers twitch once, the old instinct rising like a reflex. Then he sees Matteo's face in his mind and stops. Instead, he laughs. Not a theatrical villain's laugh, but a tired, almost bitter chuckle. He is exhausted by the monster he has spent years performing. Luca stands there, confused. While Ricardo mocks his fake concern for the marriage, Luca thought he had come to finish off a wounded animal. Instead, he has stepped into a room where the wounded animal is finally learning the difference between control and violence. Ricardo leans in, lowers his voice, and takes Luca's argument apart, piece by piece. What if his wife's public stunt was not a disaster at all? What if it was the perfect power play? He lays out what Luca was too eager to miss. Ricardo now has a blood tie to the strongest crime family in Southern Europe. He has a legitimate heir. He has a wife sharp enough to play chess while everyone else is still flipping the board. Luca's face falls. The so-called humiliation was a spotlight, designed to reveal which rats would run from the walls. Luca volunteered first. Some traps are too large to see until the bars close. The silence in the room is heavy enough to crush him. Luca's bodyguards begin to sweat as they realize their boss has doomed them. Marco looks almost amused. Luca tries to retreat, stammering that he did not mean anything by it. Ricardo's amusement vanishes. He tells Luca plainly that he came to pick bones from an empire he thought was dying, and instead exposed his own treachery. Then Ricardo dismisses him like a disobedient child, promising to tell the other allies how quickly Luca turned. No gun, no blood. Just ruin served cold. For the first time in years, Ricardo wins without becoming the thing everyone expects him to be. By now we know what Ricardo can do. Luca slinks out, tossing a weak threat behind him. Marco is stunned. He tells Ricardo he has never seen him let a man like that leave with all his fingers. But Ricardo is staring out at the city lights. Tonight. He is not thinking about territory or revenge. He is thinking about family, his son. Marco says what both of them know. After 15 years of seeing Ricardo face nightmares without blinking, he has never seen him look the way he looked when Matteo walked into the room. All the power in the world means nothing if there is no one worth protecting. Look at Ricardo now, the billionaire boss, the feared Don, undone by a 5-year-old with his eyes. The secret child did not break him. What broke him was Matteo looking at him and saying his mother thought he was sad inside. Meanwhile, Elena sits beside her sleeping son, terrified in a different way. For 5 years, she hid her pregnancy because she believed she was protecting Matteo from a monster. But in that dark hotel room, doubt starts crawling in. What if she did not save her son from a monster? What if she took away the one small anchor that might have saved a broken man sooner? Protection and regret can look painfully similar in hindsight. Elena tortures herself with that question. She had been certain the cold mobster her husband became would shatter their child, just as Ricardo's father shattered him. Then Antonio enters the room, smooth and quiet, because old Mafia men never simply walk into a scene. He tells her she is thinking too loudly. He has just watched his daughter burn her marriage in front of high society. And somehow he looks as if he is sipping the drama like fine wine. He sits down and asks if she regrets what she did. Elena looks at her innocent sleeping son and breaks. She does not know anymore. The truth is rarely clean, especially when love and fear have been tangled for years. We have seen this kind of scene before. The grand public humiliation, the revenge dress, the perfect speech, the downfall planned to the second. Elena had all of it ready, but the tragic joke is that when she finally told Ricardo about his son, he did not rage. He looked destroyed. As if the foundation beneath him had turned to dust. Antonio, cold-blooded as ever, calls that a good thing. Men like Ricardo build whole lives on denial. They tell themselves cruelty is business, that ice is armor, that love is for weaker men. A bullet cannot crack a man like that. Regret can, and tonight regret found him. But do not hate Antonio too quickly. This is where the truth becomes harder. The old man leans in, and you can see 6 years of a father's rage trapped behind his eyes. He watched his daughter fade inside a marriage that should have protected her. He watched Ricardo neglect her, humiliate her, and turn her hope into silence. Every instinct in him wanted to end it with a bullet. But Elena would not let him. She kept insisting there was still a man beneath the monster, and Antonio, against his own nature, chose to wait. Sometimes restraint is not mercy. Sometimes it is trust in the person you love, even when every nerve in your body screams against it. Antonio tells Elena what he saw in Ricardo that night. Fear. Not fear of a gun, not fear of losing territory. The deeper kind, the terror of realizing you nearly destroyed your own soul. Most men in their world bulldoze through life and leave bodies behind without regret. Ricardo could have turned the ballroom into a bloodbath. Instead, he stopped. He surrendered. Elena lets that settle. Surrender is not redemption. It does not erase the years, but it is a crack in the wall. And for a man like Ricardo, even one crack matters. The question is whether he will step through it or seal it shut again. Think back to Ricardo's hand falling away from Elena's wrist. the confidence draining from his face. Elena tells Antonio that stopping is not the same as changing. Antonio agrees, but stopping is where change begins. If the man is brave enough to keep going. He kisses his daughter's head and tells her to rest because tomorrow will bring chaos at the door. He pauses and asks whether she remembers why he did not kill Ricardo years ago, when he first saw him breaking her spirit. A father with an army chose to let his daughter suffer. He says it was because she did not want Ricardo dead. But both of them know that is only half the truth. Antonio finally admits the rest. He saw the way Ricardo looked at Elena when the mask slipped. He saw a mirror. A man trapped behind pride and paranoia, desperate to be worthy of her, but with no idea how. Elena sits there with tears in her eyes. Antonio stayed his hand because he hoped there was still a man inside the monster worth saving. Now he gives her a sad, frightening smile. Now they wait. They wait to see whether he sacrificed his daughterous youth for a fantasy. He says goodnight to a woman who still believes. Foolishly and beautifully, that love might not be finished with them yet. Then it is only Elena and her sleeping boy. The room feels heavy enough to crush her. Tomorrow, she has to face Ricardo. Tomorrow. She must either burn the house down or try to repair the foundation. But tonight she lets the world pause. She lies beside Mateo and pretends the ending has not already been written. She allows herself to hope that the man she married might still become the man she once believed he could be. She closes her eyes, and the story slips into a dream. A garden she has never seen, yet somehow it smells like home. Ricardo is there without the weight of the Mafia on him. The deadness in his gray eyes is gone. He smiles the way he did at the beginning. In the dream, Ricardo tells her he found his way back. Elena reaches for his hand, then reality hits hard. Mateo wakes with the sun, bouncing on the mattress like he has springs in his legs. He wants to know if they are on an adventure. Will there be castles? Dragons? The tragedy is that the dragons in this story wear tailored suits and carry guns. Elena pulls herself awake and tells him yes. They are on an adventure, no dragons, maybe castles. Mateo throws himself into her arms, then asks the question that cuts deepest. Are they going to see the sad man again? The one with the gray eyes, Ricardo's eyes. The boy senses his father's pain without knowing its name. Mateo suggests they bring the sad man on their adventure, because adventures make people happy. That one hurts. Antonio enters with breakfast and coffee strong enough to revive a dead hitman. He calls them his warriors. Mateo proudly talks about his dream with golden dragons. Antonio says, dragons remind us that frightening things can still be beautiful if you know how to look at them. Elena catches the meaning immediately. He is talking about Ricardo. Her father gives her the silent look that means business. She tells Mateo to eat his pastry while the grown-ups speak in the hall. He agrees, but warns them not to take too long, because adventures do not wait forever. In the hallway, the mood turns serious. Antonio gives her the news. Luca Calibris tried to kick Ricardo while he was down, but Ricardo turned the attack around and sent him away looking like an amateur. Antonio is impressed. Maybe Ricardo is not as damaged as they thought. Elena corrects him at once. He is not damaged, she says. He is armored, there is a difference. A shattered vase cannot be fixed, but armor can be removed if the person wearing it is willing to stop fighting. She is beginning to see herself, not as the woman he destroyed, but as the one person who might reach the man underneath. Antonio asks if she is ready to pay the price of trying. Elena says she has to know. Elena looks her terrifying father in the eye and admits something painful. For 6 years, she cast herself as the victim and Ricardo as the villain. Watching him fall apart changed that. The man who ruined her life had his own life ruined first. That does not excuse him. It only explains the shape of the damage. Ricardo buried his heart so deep he forgot where he hid it. Elena begins to cry, confessing that she was so focused on her own pain, she never asked who had wounded him first. Antonio softens completely. He tells her she is just like her mother, cursed with the maddening habit of finding humanity in the worst possible men. What Antonio says next is brutal. His wife's faith saved him, but it almost destroyed her. Loving someone determined to destroy himself takes from you piece by piece. Elena still refuses to step back. Mateo deserves to know his real father, not the monster she invented to protect him. And Ricardo deserves one honest chance to know his son. But she draws the line clearly. If Ricardo wastes this chance, she will take Mateo and disappear for good. No speeches, no more tests, no romantic rescue. She will build a new life from the ashes. Still, she has to try. Because she refuses to spend the rest of her life wondering what might have happened. Phase 2 begins. Antonio tells her to return to the house she avoided for 5 years, place Mateo directly in Ricardo's world. Let the cold boss face the family he lost. If he freezes, they end it. Antonio's face turns to stone. No more games, no more safety net. From this point on, everything is real. Elena feels the terror of that truth. No more hiding behind walls. She says they should go home, and silently prays there is still a home left to save. The drive takes 2 hours. Mateo buzzes with excitement, pointing at birds and buildings, completely unaware that his mother is taking him back into the lioness den. The car reaches a stunning Tuscan estate surrounded by ancient stone walls. Mateo presses his face to the glass, amazed by the massive house. He asks if they live in this castle. Elena feels a knot tighten in her stomach, because she knows what those beautiful walls have witnessed. This is where Ricardo was broken by his own father. On the steps stands Ricardo in his usual dark suit, waiting. The contrast hurts. Some of the most beautiful places in the world can hold the ugliest memories. A house does not become a home because it is grand. It becomes a home only when the people inside stop making each other afraid. Watch Ricardo here. He looks like a man who has been holding his breath for decades. When Mateo steps out of the car, Ricardo stares at him like a starving man seeing a lifeline. The desperation in his eyes is almost painful. Elena trembles with anxiety. But Mateo does not see a ruthless crime boss. He sees a tall man with sorrow all over his face and asks why his papa looks so sad then. Without waiting, the boy runs up the steps to him. Adults build terrifying walls to survive the world. Children walk straight past them. Mateo does not understand Ricardo's reputation. He only sees the wound. Look at Ricardo. The word power is tattooed across his knuckles. Yet his whole body freezes, because one small child is walking toward him. That is the irony. The feared Mafia boss is terrified of a little boy. Mateo looks up and calls him a sad giant, with all the honesty of a child who has no idea how deeply he has struck. Imagine being the most feared man in the city, only for your son to casually name the grief you spent your life hiding. Ricardo opens his mouth, but nothing comes out for once. There is no command, no threat, no performance strong enough to save him. Then Mateo does something that shatters the moment. He offers Ricardo a hug. The same underworld king who makes entire empires beg for mercy drops to his knees on the cold stone and breaks. He sobs into his son's hair, apologizing for years he did not even know he had missed. Mateo pats his back and tells him it is okay to cry and make mistakes. That is what makes the scene so powerful. Ricardo does not look redeemed yet. He looks exposed, raw, frightened, like a man who has finally found a safe place to collapse, and does not know whether he deserves to be held. Ricardo holds Mateo's face as if the boy is his salvation. In a rough, desperate voice, he promises to try to be better. He gives a broken laugh, the kind a man makes when joy feels unfamiliar. Mateo starts describing family adventures and repeats Elena's rule that happiness is something you choose every day. But while Ricardo is having the most important awakening of his life, while he locks eyes with Elena like a drowning man, Mateo spots a butterfly and runs after it. It is funny, but it is also painfully honest. Healing is not one grand speech. It is a choice that begins again the moment the speech is over. Now look at Ricardo and Elena. He stands before her stripped of armor. Admitting he has no idea how to be a father or a husband, he wants to try. But he is terrified. He reaches for her face and barely dares to touch her. He knows he has done nothing to deserve her faith. Then a servant drops a tray inside the doorway, and Ricardo's old glare flashes before he can stop it. The room freezes. Mateo looks back from the garden startled. Ricardo catches himself, breathes hard, and apologizes to the servant by name. Elena sees it all. The old monster rising, and the man fighting it back down. Elena does not soften the truth for him. She looks at his raw vulnerability and sets the hardest boundary. One step back into the cold. Ruthless man he used to be, and she is gone forever. No bargaining, no second explanations. She is not asking for perfection. But she is demanding effort every single day. Ricardo takes her hands in his scarred, violent hands, and holds her with startling gentleness. He knows she is asking him to give up the very habits that once kept him alive. That is what makes this hard. The monster was not just cruelty. It was survival. Now he has to survive without it. Ricardo finally admits the darkest truth. He became a monster because he was afraid of being weak, but now here he chooses them. He kisses Elena's hand and makes a promise heavier than any blood oath he ever swore in the underworld. Right then, Mateo shrieks with joy because he has caught a butterfly, surrounding the tense moment with innocent laughter. Elena looks into Ricardo's beautiful, damaged eyes and decides to believe the effort she has just witnessed, not just the promise. Choosing love over fear will not be clean. It will test him. It will test her. But for the first time, he is not pretending the test will be easy. The next weeks are fragile and awkward in the best possible way. Ricardo, the terrifying boss, hovers in doorways like he is afraid he might break his own child by standing too close. Slowly, though, he tries. He sits beside Matteo and learns the entire mythology of imaginary friends, including Roberto, the vegetarian dragon. They have a very serious talk about how Roberto controls his fire, so he does not burn the things he cares about. Ricardo listens harder than he has ever listened to a business report. The lesson is childish, ridiculous, and exactly what he needs. He has fire too, now he has to learn where not to aim it. One quiet dinner says everything. Across the table, Ricardo looks at Elena with pure gratitude, almost in awe of the wisdom she has given their son. Later, after Matteo negotiates his way through 4 bedtime stories, Ricardo finds Elena in the library. He tells her she raised him beautifully. Even in hiding, Elena gives him a hard but fair truth. Children do not complicate love the way adults do. She reminds him of Matteo's nickname for him, the sad giant, and Ricardo admits he feels a little less sad now. Then he catches himself, almost embarrassed by the honesty. Elena does not laugh. She simply takes his hand. Then the story turns darker. Ricardo leans forward, terrified that he will pass his father's poison down to Matteo. Elena stops him and says she has seen both versions of him, the ruthless boss he performs for the world, and the loving man buried underneath. That is when Ricardo gives her the backstory. His father taught him that love was a cage, a weapon enemies would use. And he carved that lesson into him by breaking Ricardo's fingers when he cried at his mother's funeral. It is horrifying. Suddenly, the silence, the cruelty, even the terror of tenderness make a terrible kind of sense. Ricardo drops the tough act and tells her about the day his soul went numb. He was 8 years old, standing at his mother's grave, crying for the only warmth he had ever known. When they got home, his father said tears meant weakness and snapped 3 of his fingers. 1 broken bone for each tear, Ricardo tells it in a dead voice, because that was the moment something inside him froze. He did not cry again for 25 years until he held his son. Elena stands and walks toward him. She cannot undo that little boy's pain. But for the first time, Ricardo has spoken it aloud to someone who does not turn away. Elena drops to her knees and holds Ricardo's face so he cannot look away. His father spent years beating the humanity out of him and calling that cruelty strength. But true strength now is not becoming hard again. It is holding his child without passing the wound forward. Ricardo weeps. Terrified because he has lived like a ghost for so long he does not know how to be human. Elena promises that she and Matteo will help anchor him when the old darkness pulls. He whispers that he does not deserve her. Maybe he does not. But Elena is no longer offering blind forgiveness. She is offering a path, and he will have to walk it. Look at Ricardo now. This ruthless boss, a man who solves problems with bullets, is terrified of a woman holding out her hand. Elena tells him the hardest truth of the film. Dying in the street takes far less courage than loving someone every day. Love means staying present when your instincts tell you to shut down. It means apologizing before pride can poison the room. Elena asks him to rest beside her, to remove the monstrous mask and learn what it feels like not to be alone. When he finally takes her hand, the ice cracks. Not all at once, not magically, but enough for warmth to enter. You do not erase decades of conditioning overnight. Sometimes the dead-eyed mobster still flashes across Ricardo's face one afternoon. During a business call, his voice turns so cold that the room seems to shrink. Matteo points at him and says he hates the scary face for 1 second. Ricardo looks angry, then he sees the fear in his son's eyes and hangs up on his empire. He crouches, hugs Matteo, and apologizes. Innocence disarms darkness faster than violence ever could. Matteo blames the bad mood on his imaginary dragon burning the vegetables. And Ricardo laughs so suddenly that Elena has to look away before she cries. Ricardo actually sits there and agrees that hungry dragons are the worst. Elena watches the former tyrant bring her tea and touch her hand gently, as if checking that she is real. She is falling in love with the man beneath the mask, but she is not naive. She still watches for the old patterns. This is still a mob story, and peace never lasts for long. Antonio arrives and shatters the little pocket of domestic calm. Once Matteo is out of earshot, the grim truth comes out. Luca Calabres has been making moves, whispering to the Fontana family and turning Milan's factions. The past has come to the door, and it wants payment. Antonio lays it out plainly. Calabres is using Ricardo's new family man image as proof of weakness, hoping to steal the throne. Elena holds her breath, waiting for the monster to wake up. She waits for Ricardo's eyes to go cold, for the ruthless mob king to return. He almost does. His hand tightens around the glass until it cracks. A line of blood appears in his palm. Then he sets the glass down, wraps a napkin around his hand, and looks at Antonio calmly. Ricardo DeSantis, the man who once trusted no one, is asking his father-in-law for help. Elena releases a breath she did not realize she was holding. Ricardo tells Antonio that asking for help is not weakness. It is strategy, and maybe even wisdom. You can see respect settle over the old man's face. Antonio finally understands that his daughter did not marry a tyrant beyond saving. She married a man who is trying, and that effort matters more than pride. So he proposes a counterattack. They will not hit Calabres in the streets, because that would only prove Ricardo is unstable. Instead, they will weaponize the truth. They will throw a grand gathering and show the whole underworld that Ricardo's family is his fortress, not his flaw. If Calabres wants to call love weakness, they will make him say it in front of everyone. The strategy is pure psychological warfare. Invite every rival, every backstabber, and place Elena and Mateo in full view. Calabres is counting on a divided house. If they show unity, his plot weakens before it begins still. Inviting sharks into your home while your child plays nearby is a dangerous gamble. Ricardo knows it. He tells Antonio the risk is enormous. Then he looks at Elena, takes her hand, and says the words that matter. He trusts the people in that room, completely. A man who spent his life sleeping with one eye open is finally lowering his guard. Trust terrifies him, but he chooses it anyway. For the next 2 weeks, Elena becomes relentless. Menace, security, guest lists, seating plans, she handles everything. But underneath the work, she is suffocating. She is not afraid of mobsters or guns. She is afraid that once Ricardo is surrounded by his old world, the old mask will slide back into place, that the gentle man she is beginning to love will vanish, and the ice-cold king will return. She tells him this one night in the dark, lying beside him. She admits she is terrified of who he might become. Ricardo pulls her close and whispers the answer that breaks her heart. He is afraid too. Afraid the old version of him is not dead, only waiting. Ricardo admits the old violent ways are easy. They are a worn groove in his mind, and he is afraid of slipping back into them. So he tells Elena what he will do. Whenever he feels darts pulling at him, he will look for her face. She is his anchor. Elena worries that is too much pressure, but he tells her it is not pressure, it is purpose. This is the moment the walls finally come down. She touches his face and says she loves him. Not the mob boss, the real man. The father who cries over his son and brings her tea, she loves him. But she also needs him to keep choosing the man he wants to become. Ricardo tells her he loves her too, and the irony hangs in the dark between them. He spent his life believing love was a liability. A loaded gun someone could press against his head, but there, beside Elena, he understands that love is the only thing worth defending without becoming cruel. The only thing that makes him want to be better. They kiss. And it is not frantic or performative. It is quiet, heavy, and final. For the first time in 6 years, Elena believes they might survive. When morning comes on the day of the party, the estate is perfect. Gardens trimmed, fountains running, every detail arranged like a stage for war. The sharks begin to arrive, sleek cars, expensive suits, false smiles. Elena plays the perfect hostess while panic chews at her from the inside. Ricardo keeps his hand steady on her back. Then Luca Calabres arrives late, because even his entrance has to be a cheap power move. He steps from the car with a swagger and makes a comment about never being invited before. Ricardo shakes his hand without flinching. Luca then turns his oily charm toward Elena and says he hopes her domestic situation has stabilized. It is the kind of comment meant to provoke. Elena simply smiles, sharp as glass, and tells him their home was never unstable. It was only underestimated. Just as the tension rises, Mateo comes running across the lawn, calling for his mother and father. Luca's face twitches when the boy calls Ricardo Papa. Mateo loudly announces that his imaginary dragon says someone here smells bad. Ricardo kneels, playing along, and asks which man. Without hesitation, Mateo points straight at Luca and calls him a wolf who wants to eat sheep. Children have a terrifying instinct for dangerous people. The silence that falls over the garden is perfect. Elena bites her cheek to keep from laughing, while Ricardo fights the same battle. Luca wanted fear, instead. He has been judged by a child with sticky fingers and no filter. Mateo looks at Luca with those piercing gray eyes and asks if he is a wolf. Luca, sweating in his expensive suit, grinds his teeth and says he is not a sneaky wolf. Mateo shrugs and gives the final blow. That is exactly what a wolf would say. Then he runs off to play pirates, leaving a mob boss publicly humiliated by a preschooler. The irony is perfect. Luca believed he was entering a divided house, a place where he could assert dominance. Instead, he was embarrassed by a child in front of everyone. Riccardo and Elena politely excused themselves to listen to a toast, leaving Luca stranded on the grass with his smile rotting on his face. Antonio steps forward before 30 lethal Mafia bosses and drops the first bomb, 7 years ago. He faked his own death because he was tired of betrayal. The audacity is almost impressive. He says he wanted a clean life for Elena. Instead, she married Riccardo, a man with ice in his veins. The irony is cruel. Parents often try to steer their children away from danger, only to watch them walk into a different version of it. Riccardo stands there with his jaw tight and takes the heat. The old him would have interrupted. The old him would have punished the insult. Today he stays silent, because Elena's hand is in his. Riccardo endures Antonio's words without reacting, which is the smartest thing he can do. Antonio admits he could have destroyed him. But Elena begged him to wait. She believed the ice-cold boss could learn to love. Then Antonio surprises everyone. He smiles and says he was wrong, but not in the way they think. He watched Riccardo change from a ruthless kingpin into a present father and devoted husband. Not perfect, not clean, but present. That word matters. People can change when they stop hiding behind the damage done to them. Then Antonio turns his lethal gaze toward Luca Calabris, and the garden grows very still. This is where the trap closes. Antonio leans toward the microphone, his voice calm enough to frighten everyone. Some fools, he says. Believe a family man is a weak man on cue. His men pass out folders like this is a board meeting from hell. Inside is a documented trail of Luca, trying to territory and run trafficking routes, breaking the oldest rules of their world. Luca's face loses all color. It would almost be possible to feel sorry for him if he had not walked straight into this himself. His mistake was confusing Riccardo's restraint with lost power. The monster inside Riccardo is not leading anymore. But that does not mean Riccardo has forgotten how to win. Antonio reminds everyone that behind Riccardo stands a loyal family, and behind that family stands a ghost who came back from the dead. The garden goes silent. Luca tries to defend himself, but he is finished. Riccardo steps forward with the ease of a man who won the game 3 moves ago, and politely suggests Luca should leave. No shouting, no violence. Just clean, unmistakable dominance. This is the version of power Luca did not expect. Controlled, patient, impossible to bait. Defeated and humiliated, Luca practically flees to his car. Riccardo watches him go, then quietly unclenches the fist Elena has been holding. As Luca's tires squeal in the distance, Riccardo takes center stage. This is the emotional turn the whole story has been building toward. He faces a crowd of killers and admits his entire philosophy was wrong. He used to believe fear was the only way to survive. Then he brings Elena beside him, openly showing the world what others called his weakness. He says she taught him that vulnerability can be a form of strength. It is a stunning admission, especially from a man who once saw honesty as a wound. He lays his old life down in front of them. Strength, he says, is not measured by what you destroy, but by what you refuse to lose. The tension is so thick you can almost hear a heartbeat. Then the oldest mobster in the crowd begins to clap. Slowly, others join him. Years of suspicion and poisonous pride give way to respect. Riccardo and Elena share a look of relief, whispering that they did it, right on cue. Matteo crashes into them, completely unaware of the heavy politics that just unfolded. He babbles about his toy dragon scaring the wolves away. Riccardo scoops him up, laughing like an ordinary father. That is the sweetness of the scene. The empire may have shifted, but Matteo only knows that his father is smiling, and for now that is enough. Time moves forward, but the story does not slow into a fairy tale. The threats fade on the surface, and Elena breathes easier for the first time. Yet the house remains guarded. Riccardo pours his obsessive focus into fatherhood, instead of memorizing hit lists. He memorizes imaginary dragon lore and tucks Matteo in every night. He also begins to notice his wife in ways he never did before. He learns that she hates waking early but loves sunrise in the library. He builds her a hidden art studio, not to impress her, but because he finally understands that attention matters more than luxury. For years, he gave her beautiful things and called it love. Now he gives her presents, and she can feel the difference. But years of pain do not disappear because a man decides to do better. Elena still wakes crying, haunted by the loneliness she endured for so long. Riccardo's first instinct is to fix it like a problem, to be strong, to do something. Elena stops him. He cannot undo the past. He can only sit with her in the dark and hold her. Some nights he does it well. Some nights he goes too quiet and she has to pull him back. 3 months later, she enters the studio he built for her. She has not painted in 7 years and believes her gift died with her happiness. Then she notices a sealed envelope on the table, marked with her mother's name. Elena freezes. Inside the envelope is an old photo of her mother, wearing the diamond bracelet Ricardo threw into the Venice Canal years ago. Beneath it, a note in Ricardo's handwriting says, "I failed to give you this once. I will spend my life giving you reasons to paint again." Elena does not cry. At first she simply stands there, breathing hard. Then she picks up a brush. A garden of deep red roses appears on the canvas. At the center are a man in black, a woman in white, and a little boy chasing a butterfly. Hours later, Ricardo walks in and sees the future she is daring to imagine. He asks if she believes they can get there. After a long pause, she says, "I believe we can keep walking toward it." For years, Ricardo lived by one brutal rule: power is everything, and love is a loaded gun you hand to your enemies. Now he stands behind Elena, quietly grateful that he was wrong. Elena turns to him, her voice unsteady. "There is something I need to tell you," she whispers. His old instincts flare at once. He braces for impact. "I am pregnant," she says. His face shifts from shock to pure joy. "We were going to have another baby," he asks. Elena bites her lip, afraid he is not ready. The fear is understandable. One child changed him. Another will test whether the change can hold. Ricardo sees that fear and does not rush to erase it. He simply takes both her hands and stays. Then he kisses her. It is desperate. Full of apologies he never knew how to speak, he frames her face in his hands. His thumbs catching tears she did not realize had fallen ready. He breathes. "I've been waiting my whole life for this, a real family. Children who will know they are loved and never have to guess where their father's heart is." Elena whispers that this baby will know. Then she says it. "I love you." The words come out clean, without the poison that once surrounded them. She admits that love still frightens her, because loving him once nearly destroyed her. Ricardo rests his forehead against hers and promises that this time, fear will not make him cruel. 6 months later, we return to the same bedroom where Matteo was born into heartbreak. This time, everything is different. Elena gives birth to a little girl. They name her Sofia, after Ricardo's mother, the only person who showed him warmth before the mob swallowed him. Ricardo holds his daughter with tears in his gray eyes and no shame at all. "She has your hazel eyes," he says, "and your stubbornness," Elena answers, exhausted but glowing. "She fought me for 9 months. The room feels peaceful for 1 perfect minute. Then Marco appears in the doorway, pale and silent. He does not speak in front of the children, but Ricardo understands the look. Peace has never lasted long in their world. Matteo bursts into the room like a rocket, with Antonio following behind him. "Is my sister here?" he demands. Ricardo kneels and brings the baby to his eye level. Matteo gives her a serious 6-year-old stare. "She's really small," he says. "Does she know about Captain Storm yet?" Ricardo laughs and tells him he can teach her. Matteo brightens, asking if she can come on their adventures. Everyone, Ricardo promises. But as Elena watches Marco slip a black folder into Antonio's hand, her smile tightens. The children see a family room filled with love. The adults see something else too, a warning arriving at the worst possible time. In the doorway, Antonio watches the scene unfold, then glances down at the folder. Elena looks at her hard. Dangerous father, and sees pride in his eyes, but also concern. "You did well," he tells her quietly. "You saw a heart where I only saw a monster. Look at what you built." Elena takes his rough hand and says they built it together. Antonio squeezes her hand and casually mentions that he was fully prepared to shoot Ricardo if he failed. Across the room, Ricardo catches his eye, then notices the folder. Once these two men were wolves waiting to tear each other apart. Now one look passes between them, and both understand the same thing. The family has enemies again. Ricardo quietly thanks Antonio for not pulling the trigger, but his eyes remain on the black folder. Antonio smirks and tells him to thank Elena's judgment, then waits until the children are distracted. A few years pass and the story stays honest. Ricardo still fights the instincts his father carved into him. Elena still has nights when old pain rises, when children bully Matteo. Ricardo teaches him that strength does not mean cruelty. When tiny Sofia starts running little schemes at 3, Elena guides that sharp mind toward creativity instead of control. And when rivals try to kidnap the children, Antonio's network shuts it down instantly. But this time, something in the failed attempt feels different. The response to the kidnappers is swift, but the twist is that Elena designs the counterattack. She studies the routes, the money, the timing, and realizes the attack was never meant to succeed. It was a message. Quietly, she becomes the true architect of the empire. Ricardo does not shrink from that. He celebrates her brilliance in public, making it clear that his wife is his equal. Years later, Marco stands on the terrace with Elena, watching the once terrifying Mafia boss chase his children through the grass. Marco says she completely changed him. Elena shakes her head. She gave him a safe place to change himself. Then Marco lowers his voice and says the name she has not heard in years, Valeria. Elena goes still. Marco explains that the failed kidnapping, the strange money trail, the rumors from Milan, they all lead back to a woman living under a false name in Marseille. Valeria did not disappear. She waited for years. Elena thought her greatest battle was saving Riccardo from himself. Now she realizes the past has been circling them from a distance. Down in the garden, Riccardo catches her eye and smiles, open and unguarded. While their children climb onto his shoulders, Elena smiles back. But her hand tightens around the terrace rail. She has spent years building a softer life. If someone is coming for it, softness will not be enough. 10 years have passed since the infamous Gala. Elena stands before her mirror, studying the woman looking back. The old Elena was brittle, sharpened by survival and hollowed by loneliness. This Elena is softer, but not weaker. She knows how to bend around obstacles and still carve through stone. Then 16-year-old Matteo leans into the doorway. He has his father's piercing gray eyes, but none of the old cruelty. He smirks and says his impatient father is complaining downstairs, claiming he has waited his whole life for her. Elena laughs, bright and free, but when Matteo leaves, she opens a drawer and checks the small pistol hidden beneath her silk gloves. Tonight is not only an anniversary, it is bait. Elena says good things are worth waiting for, just as Riccardo steps behind her. 10 years of real marriage have changed him. His hair is silvering now, and laugh lines have replaced the old cruel scowl. The faded tattoos on his knuckles still carry the weight of cartel history, but the meaning has changed. He once wanted the power to destroy. Now he carries the quieter power of a man who knows what he is protecting. He calls her beautiful, and they stare at their reflection. Amazed they survived each other. Then Elena mentions the night he publicly destroyed her life, and Riccardo laughs, but his eyes drift to the drawer. He knows about the gun, he also knows she is scared. Riccardo holds Elena, the woman who disarmed him completely, and the irony is not lost on him. He spent his life trying to be the most dangerous predator in every room, only to be outplayed by the one person he underestimated. He tells her he loves her more than words can hold. The camera finds Matteo nearby, serious but happy, watching the life his parents managed to build. Sofia appears behind him, sharp-eyed and calm, already reading the tension. Adults think they are hiding. She slips something into Elena's hand, a folded note found near the west gate. No signature, just one line. A wife may forgive, but a mistress remembers. The scene widens across the garden. 10-year-old Sofia is playing the innocent child again. The twins are creating chaos. And old Antonio is smiling like a sweet grandfather. Even Marco. Once the ruthless hitman is there as if this were any normal family gathering. These people used to make enemies disappear. Now they sip wine under warm lights, while guards quietly shift around the edges of the estate. Those who once feared Riccardo have learned to respect him. He and Elena built a dynasty on loyalty and love, not terror. But love does not mean blindness. As the party winds down, Riccardo and Elena find themselves alone on the old terrace, both aware that someone has crossed the outer wall. Riccardo asks Elena if she has any regrets. Think of what he put her through, nights crying in the dark, years wondering whether hope had made a fool of her. She tells him she has no regrets, not because the pain was fair, but because they survived it and refused to let it own the rest of their lives. Then he lowers himself to one knee. The man who once bowed to no one kneels before the woman he used to think he owned. Elena's eyes fill with tears for one brief second. The danger disappears. Then a red laser dot slides across Riccardo's chest and lands directly over his heart. The finale unfolds with a striking contrast. Riccardo is on one knee, holding out a new ring while death finds him from the dark. Elena sees the red dot before he does. She does not scream, she moves. She knocks him sideways just as the shot cracks across the terrace. The bullet shatters the glass behind them. Guards flood the garden. Antonio's sweet grandfather mask vanishes in an instant. Riccardo grabs Elena, shielding her with his body, but she pushes him back and points toward the cypress trees. Alive, she says. I want whoever sent them alive. The most feared man in the city looks at his wife and realizes something with a strange, fierce pride. She was never only the woman who saved him. She became the queen of this house. The shooter is dragged out minutes later, bleeding but breathing. He is young, terrified, and carrying Valeria, Ul's old silver pendant, in his pocket. Riccardo's face goes cold, and for one dangerous second the old wolf returns. Elena sees it, so do Matteo and Sofia from the doorway. Ricardo's hand tightens around his gun. This is the real test, not the speech, not the party, not the applause years ago. Elena steps beside him and says his name once. Not begging, not pleading, just reminding him who is watching. Ricardo breathes hard, then lowers the weapon. Her love taught him how to love back. But his choices in moments like this are what made that love safe. Years later, Elena is older now, her hair gray, but her sharp eyes are unchanged, the same eyes that once brought a dangerous man to his knees. Grandchildren run through the garden, unaware of how close that terrace night came to becoming another tragedy. Valeria was found, tried by the old laws and exiled for good. Ricardo did not pull the trigger. That choice became family legend, not because it was soft, but because it proved the curse had truly broken. He walks toward Elena more slowly now, still looking at her as if she is a miracle. He laces his fingers through hers and whispers that they changed the story. His father raised him to pass down pain instead. He left his children something stronger. Ricardo's voice cracks as he watches the children laugh. This estate was once a fortress of fear. Now it is alive. Elena tells him he built it. He kisses her hand and says she proved he could become a better man. He knows what his story was supposed to be, by every rule of their world. A ruthless man like him should have died alone, feared and hated instead. He sits beside the woman he loves, watching his family play, leaving behind tenderness instead of terror. Redemption was never a speech, and it was never a single apology. It was every time he could have chosen the old darkness and chose his family instead. They sit together in the fading light, surrounded by the kind of peace that can only be earned after surviving hell. Their road was never easy. They fought brutally. They nearly destroyed each other more than once, but again and again they chose each other, not once. Not in some grand romantic moment, but every day. On the days Ricardo wanted to disappear behind ice, on the nights Elena almost gave up. On the terrace where a bullet nearly ended everything, they chose the bond. Now the words "I love you" come easily, as the sunset turns the sky gold. Children's laughter rises through the garden, like proof that the fight was worth it. And here we are at the end. Two people who began as strangers, almost enemies on opposite sides, are now an old couple, holding hands in the twilight. They are finally at peace. Ricardo did not find his greatest victory by seizing power or crushing rivals. He found it by surrendering fully to love, then proving that surrender every day after. The wolf is finally at rest. Their journey leaves us with one simple truth. No matter how far into darkness you have wandered, you are not beyond the choice to turn back. Change is possible when you are brave enough to fight for it. So if the world has hardened your heart, remember these two. Keep moving toward the light. Everyone deserves a chance at a beautiful ending. The story of Elena and Ricardo teaches us that real power is not measured by fear, money, or dominance. At the beginning, Ricardo believes power means control. He controls people, businesses, alliances, and even the image of his marriage. He walks into the Gala with another woman, thinking his status makes him untouchable. But the moment Elena appears with their hidden son, his illusion of power begins to collapse. This is an important educational lesson. Many people confuse authority with strength. They believe that if others fear them, they are powerful. But fear is fragile. It can make people obey for a while, but it cannot create loyalty, love, or respect. Ricardo's empire is large, but his family is broken. That shows the emptiness of power without responsibility. Elena demonstrates a different kind of power. She does not scream, she does not beg, she does not attack blindly. Instead, she speaks calmly, reveals the truth, and forces Ricardo to face the consequences of his choices. Her strength comes from patience, intelligence, preparation, and self-respect. The story teaches viewers that the strongest person in the room is not always the loudest or most feared. Sometimes, true strength is quiet. It is the ability to stand with dignity after being hurt. It is the courage to protect a child, expose betrayal, and still offer a chance for change. By the end, Ricardo learns that power should protect what matters, not destroy it. A man is not strong because he can make others kneel. He is strong when he can kneel before love, admit his wrongs, and become worthy of his family.